My name is Nora Mitchell. I'm 31 years old. Last week, I found out my own family priced my grandmother's life at exactly $75,000. To them, I'm the harmless one. The dork with a laptop who tried the startup thing and, as my sister Riley likes to say, ended up doing tech support or whatever. They don't know that the whatever is IronGate Labs, a cybersecurity company in San Francisco that I quietly founded, funded, and still control. They don't know we're weeks away from an IPO, or that the servers they joke about are the reason any of them still have a credit score. They just know I'm quiet and shy. Maybe that's why they didn't bother to close my dad's office door all the way. They didn't even lower their voices as they sat in there, my father Dan, my perfect heart surgeon sister Riley, and my ex, Evan the finance genius, calmly mapping out how to take my grandmother's coastal motel, the Seaglass Inn, away from me and use it to plug the holes in their own drowning debts. When I pulled into the parking lot of my building in San Antonio that night, it struck me again how perfectly my life matches the picture my family has in their heads. Faded yellow lines on cracked asphalt. A 3-story complex with peeling beige paint and humming AC units hanging crookedly from the windows. My Corolla tucked between a rusty pickup and a dented SUV, like it's hiding. If Riley saw it, she'd feel validated. If my dad walked in, he'd sigh and say, "You know, Nora, if you pushed yourself a little harder, you wouldn't have to live like this." My family don't know that while my neighbor downstairs screams at his Xbox through thin walls, I log into an encrypted dashboard that shows IronGate Labs' cap table and burn rate, the list of global clients we protect, the charts from our last funding round. They definitely don't know that 3 days before that family meeting, we closed a massive private round that pushed IronGate's valuation into the billions. Not millions. Billions. With a B. On paper, I am the kind of woman Evan brags about managing. In reality, he still introduces me at holidays as Nora. She does something in IT. It used to make me laugh in a small, tired way. But that night, after I heard them calmly disassemble my grandmother's legacy and carve it up to feed their debts, the joke stopped being funny. I sat at my kitchen counter, laptop open, the blue light reflecting off the chipped laminate. The IronGate dashboard glowed back at me. Investor names, pre-IPO planning notes, projections that stretched out 5-10 years. Everything I had poured myself into since college. Everything I had kept separate from family, like it was radioactive. My phone buzzed with a notification from one of the shell entities I'd created over the years. Lone Star Health Access, automatic payment sent to the Riley Foundation. I clicked through and stared at the transaction, the same pattern I'd repeated for years. Anonymous support. Quiet lifeline. No questions. At first, it had felt noble. Riley was drowning in med school loans, foundation expenses, the pressure of being the golden child. When she'd confessed, panicked, that she might default on something and ruin everything, I'd stepped in. I built a structure of fictitious funds with boring names, layered enough distance that no one would trace anything back to IronGate or to me. I told myself I was protecting her. Protecting Dad from the truth that his shining surgeon daughter was one step from financial chaos. Every time an overdue balance hit her inbox, money slid quietly out of mine. And in my father's office, they'd still called me ballast. I closed the transaction window. Then I closed access to the shell funds. One by one. Click. Disable. Suspend. Freeze. My hands shook, but I kept going. No more invisible rescues. No more late-night wires. No more patching holes they drilled themselves. If they wanted to treat me like a clueless dork with a laptop, fine. From now on, that laptop was closed to them. Instead of driving back to my dad's house to scream, I booked a room at a business hotel downtown and packed a backpack like I was just going on another work trip. 2 t-shirts, jeans, my laptop, chargers. Toothbrush. The essentials for war. The hotel is one of those all-glass skyscrapers that looks like a flash drive stuck into the city skyline. IronGate rents a small office on the 23rd floor, officially as a regional client suite. Unofficially, it's my bolt hole when I need distance from my life in San Antonio, but can't fly to San Francisco. I checked in at midnight, rode the elevator up alone, and unlocked the frosted glass door with my keycard. Inside, the office was all soft gray and blue light, 2 standing desks, a couch, a wall of servers sealed behind glass, humming like a heartbeat. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked down over the highway, red brake lights crawling like ants. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and logged in. At IronGate, internal tools means things we build for clients who are terrified of losing control. Audit dashboards, data tracing, risk mapping systems. I'd never aimed them at my own blood before. The first, my father. I authenticated into a bank integration sandbox we'd used for a corporate client, then fed in the routing information I'd quietly collected over the years, under the guise of helping with his online banking. Within minutes, a view of his accounts unfolded: loans, mortgages, lines of credit. Red numbers everywhere. He wasn't just overextended, he was suffocating. Payments to political contacts, construction overruns, legal fees. And at the center, a cluster of notes tied to the Seaglass Inn as collateral. He'd already mortgaged Grandma's motel once. They weren't planning to use it for debt, they'd already used it. And now they wanted my signature to make the news legal. I swallowed hard and switched to Evan. His firm had passed through IronGate's orbit when they were vetting security vendors, and he'd been stupid enough to log into his email from one of our secured demo environments. I still had the audit keys. With them, I could see metadata, chains of communication. Not the contents of everything, but enough. I searched for Seaglass and the names of 2 regional developers I recognized. He'd been in talks to sell the property for months. They discussed renovation budgets, projected profits, anticipated resistance from current title holder, and family pressure strategy. That last phrase made my hands go cold. Then my sister Riley. I hesitated before opening her channel. For her, I didn't need anything fancy. She'd added her foundation email to one of our encrypted messaging tools because it was so cool that my sister's company makes spy stuff. She never changed the default permissions. I typed her handle and watched her chat history bloom. Buried between surgical schedules and PR notes were messages to my dad and Evan. Screenshots of my text messages. Commentary about how Nora will cave if we make it about Grandma and she's always felt guilty about leaving. We can use that. At one point she wrote, she should thank us, honestly. We're giving her cash and taking on the stress. Piece by piece, the pattern assembled. Present the motel as ballast, an aging asset too heavy for poor, fragile Nora to manage. Offer $75,000 for good luck, dress it up as kindness, a comfortable life. Slide papers across a table that quietly attach part of my dad's worst debts to my name as voluntary help to the family, so his creditors see my future as their backup plan. My lawyer and partner Lucas didn't say I told you so, but it was there in the silence between us when I finished talking. I sat on the couch in the little hotel office, my knees pulled up, laptop balanced on top of them, watching his face in the glow of the screen. He was in San Francisco, late afternoon sunlight behind him, hair a mess the way it always got when he'd been reading contracts for too many hours. I was worried about this exact thing, he said finally. If you don't cut them off cleanly before the IPO, any creditor who gets desperate enough will start sniffing around your equity. You're not just a daughter to them, Nora. You're collateral. I rubbed my forehead. So what do we do? I can't just pretend they don't exist. Legally, he said, you can. Or close to it. A hint of dry humor passed over his face. We put in writing what they've always treated as reality, that you don't expect dissent from them. No claims on their assets, current or future. No rights to anything they own. You just walk away. So, that protects them, I stated. How does it protect me? He smiled a little, the way he does when he's about to pull a rabbit out of a statute book. Because contracts go both ways. If you're waiving claims, they're waiving claims. If you give up the right to touch their money, we can mirror language that quietly says they give up the right to touch yours. All of it. Now and later. The idea made something in my chest unfold. We spent the next hour on a shared draft. On the surface, the title looked exactly like something my father would love, agreement on Nora Mitchell's voluntary waiver of claims against her family. It read like a noble sacrifice. I could already hear him praising my maturity. Paragraph after paragraph spelled out how I acknowledged no expectation of inheritance beyond what had already been allocated, how I would never contest prior transfers, how I recognized their financial difficulties and wanted to free them from moral obligations. Of course, Lucas wrote that last part. He understands performance. Then, in the dense middle section that no one normal ever reads, we tucked in the line that changed everything. It was just one sentence, wrapped in cross-references and legalese. Buried inside, their irrevocable, unconditional, and perpetual renunciation of any direct or indirect claim, lien, encumbrance, security interest, or expectation, contractual or equitable, in or against any present or future asset, share, option, or income stream belonging to Nora Mitchell, including but not limited to equity or proceeds related to IronGate Labs Incorporated. My name, IronGate's name, in black and white. To anyone skimming, it looked like boilerplate symmetry, a fairness clause. But to any judge, it would be crystal clear. They signed away the right to ever come for my company, my stock, and my money. Will they catch it? I asked. Lucas shook his head. Your dad delegitimized you to feel safe. Your sister thinks money is something people hand her for being impressive. Evan believes he's the smartest man in any room. They're exactly the kind of people who sign what flatters them and assigns you the burden. You're sure this holds? I whispered. I am, he replied. Once they sign, any attempt to grab your IronGate stake becomes a bad joke. Creditors can't claim what your family has already renounced in writing. They want you to voluntarily help the family. He nodded at the document. Here it is. Help in legal form. Just not the kind they were counting on. The day of the family meeting at the golf club, I spent more time choosing my outfit than I had in months. I picked a soft blue dress that looked a little too simple for the place, a cardigan that made me seem smaller, and flats instead of heels. The effect in the mirror was exactly what I needed. Harmless, plain, a woman who should be grateful for whatever she gets. The club near Houston looked amazing. The conference room they booked sat on the second floor, a glass box overlooking the course, with a polished table long enough for 10 and chairs that cost more than my car. Dad and Riley were already there when I walked in. Riley stood by the window in a white dress that probably had a brand name people whispered, arms crossed loosely, phone on the table displaying the Riley Foundation logo. Dad sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to the perfect point, a leather folder in front of him. Between them, a neat stack of papers waited, clipped and ready. Nora, he said, standing up with that performative warmth he reserves for guests and waiters. You made it. Come, sit. We ordered iced tea for you. He actually pulled out a chair. While Riley smiled to me. We really appreciate you coming, she said. We know this is emotional. Grandma's estate, the motel, all of it. I sank into the chair, set my bag on the floor, and folded my hands in my lap. Okay, I said softly. Just tell me what you need me to do. Dad's face softened like I'd hit his cue. Sweetheart, he started, we've been looking at the numbers. The Seaglass Inn is, well, it's a lot. For someone in your situation. Old building, constant maintenance, property taxes. It's not fair to put that weight on you when you're just trying to live your life. Riley leaned forward, elbows on the table. You deserve comfort, Nora. Not stress. Not being tied to an old, failing motel on the coast. I let my brow furrow, glanced at the papers. So, what are you suggesting? I asked, adding a tiny wobble to my voice. Dad slid the first document toward me with a pen on top. The heading was the one Lucas and I had chosen, Agreement on Nora Mitchell's voluntary waiver of claims against her family. It probably felt like a gift to him. We thought, he said gently, that instead of you struggling with this property, we'd take it off your hands. Handle the legal stuff, the repairs, all of it. In exchange, we give you $75,000. Cash. To give you a comfortable cushion while you keep doing your computer work. Riley nodded, eyes big with staged concern. It's generous, Nor. Most people never see that kind of money at once. You could upgrade your apartment, take a little vacation, breathe. And this, she tapped the pages, just cleans up Grandma's inheritance. Makes sure no one can bother you about it later. The words clean up and comfortable cushion almost made me laugh. I looked down instead, let my fingers tremble just enough to be visible. So if I sign, I don't have to worry about the motel anymore? I asked. You'll take care of it? Exactly, Dad said quickly. You sign a couple of documents, we handle the rest. Good plan, right? I let my shoulders drop, like I was surrendering. In a way, I was. Just not the way he thought. For family peace, I whispered. If this is what you think is best, I'll sign. Riley exhaled, relieved, already reaching for her phone like she was mentally rearranging her schedule now that the annoying problem was solved. Dad turned the papers toward me, flipped to the signature lines. There's 2 copies, he said. One for us, one for you. Just sign where I've marked. It's all standard. Of course, he'd marked only my signature lines. I took the pen, signed the first copy with a careful, rounded Nora E. Mitchell, just like I always had. Then the second. My hands were steady now. Good girl, he murmured, almost under his breath. I slid the pen back and pushed both stacks toward them. Your turn, I said. He didn't even pretend to read. He flipped automatically to the flagged page, scanned just long enough to confirm his own name was spelled correctly, and scrawled his signature with a practiced flourish. Halfway down the page, he stopped looking at the text entirely, eyes already drifting back toward his phone. Riley followed suit, barely glancing at the dense clauses in the middle. She signed where the little yellow tabs told her to, chatting at the same time about a donor she needed to call and a gala speech she was nervous about. I watched them both, almost attached, as they signed away exactly what they thought they were securing. They didn't even notice the line that quietly snapped shut around them. By the time the charity ball started that evening, the glass conference room had been transformed into something out of Riley's Instagram feed. Same building, but different world. Downstairs, staff rushed around setting white tablecloths, lining up champagne flutes, checking the ice sculptures shaped like tiny hearts. Upstairs, the ballroom doors opened onto a wash of soft lighting and live jazz. The Riley Foundation banner hung over the stage, blown-up photos of my sister smiling in scrubs on easels. I stood near the back, in the same simple blue dress, now with a touch of mascara and lip gloss because Riley had insisted. Just try, she'd said, dabbing foundation on my face in the bathroom. There'll be photographers. You'll want to look decent when I thank you for being such a supportive sister. I had smiled at that. She thought she was doing me a favor by letting me stand in her perfectly curated light. Tables filled with donors, hospital executives, local politicians, all murmuring and checking their phones. They'd paid obscene amounts of money for the right to sit closer to the stage. Evan floated among them like a dark-suited fish in the right current, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, collecting promises. Riley, of course, was everywhere at once, posing for photos, adjusting place cards, rehearsing lines under her breath. Remember, she whispered as she swept past me toward the stage, tonight is about the foundation. No family problems. Okay, I said. And I meant it. There wouldn't be drama from me. Lights dimmed just enough to make everything look expensive. My father walked onto the stage to polite applause, tuxedo perfect, bow tie sharp, hand raised in that modest, oh, please gesture he'd practiced for years. Good evening, he began, voice warm and rehearsed. Thank you all for being here to support the incredible work my daughter, Dr. Riley Mitchell, is doing for children in need of life-saving heart surgeries. I knew his speech. I'd seen earlier versions in his email drafts when I was pulling data. Gratitude, sacrifice, family. A line about legacy. A line about doing whatever it takes for your children. As he spoke, a soft wave of vibration started rolling through the room. Tiny buzzes at first. Then more. People glanced down at their phones, frowned, tapped screens. A couple at the table in front of me leaned toward each other, whispering. The man's eyebrows shot up. I knew what it was before I even reached for my own phone. A push notification sat on my lock screen, framed in blue. Breaking. Cybersecurity firm IronGate Labs surges as it goes public, shares quadruple within first hour of trading. For a second, the room blurred. Months of filings, endless calls, late nights, Every line of code, it all condensed into that one brutal little alert lighting up 100 screens at once. Around me, the murmurs grew. Someone at the bar actually said, "Holy," before catching himself. My dad hesitated mid-sentence, eyes darting toward the front row, where a donor in a sequined dress stared openly at her phone, then up at the stage, then back down. Riley's phone chimed too, loud in the brief pause. She snatched it up, glanced quickly, and I watched confusion crease her forehead. Then she saw the name. IronGate. Her expression shifted through 3 emotions so fast I almost missed them: surprise, curiosity, calculation. She lifted her phone again, this time intentionally opening TikTok, thumb moving fast. Of course she'd stream it. Why wouldn't she? Viral moments were her oxygen. Dad cleared his throat, tried to continue. As I was saying, family is at the heart of. A second chime, sharper, came from the AV booth. The tech guy stepped up on stage, whispered something in my father's ear, then gestured toward the wings. My dad's smile froze. "Ladies and gentlemen," the tech announced over the mic, awkward but earnest, "we have a special guest who's asked to say a few words. Lucas Porter, Corporate Counsel for IronGate Labs." The room shifted like it was breathing in. Lucas walked onto the stage in a dark suit, no tie, the same calm expression he wears in boardrooms full of people with too much money and not enough patience. He nodded to my father, took the mic, and looked out at the crowd. "Some of you," he began, "may have just seen the news about IronGate Labs' public debut." Scattered laughter, the kind that comes from people who desperately want to be early to whatever matters. "I won't take much of your time," he continued. "I just wanted to offer congratulations where they're due. Many of you know our work protects hospitals, financial institutions, even organizations like the Riley Foundation. What most of you don't know." He paused, eyes scanning the room, and, just briefly landing on me, "is who built it." Phones were raised now. Riley had lifted hers high, live streaming, whispering excitedly to her followers, "You guys, this is wild. They're talking about some cyber company that just went public. We had no idea." Lucas smiled slightly. "IronGate Labs," he said clearly, "was founded by someone who prefers to stay invisible. Someone her own family thinks of as the quiet one. A failed IT girl, I believe was the phrase." Every muscle in my body tightened. "And yet," he went on, "without her, there would be no IronGate. No billion-dollar valuation. No IPO." He turned, finally, fully toward where I stood. "Please congratulate the founder and CEO of IronGate Labs, Nora Mitchell." My dad's face went white. Riley's arm wavered, her phone still pointed at the stage, her expression caught between awe and panic. Evan, standing near the donors, looked like someone had swapped his champagne for acid. On my screen, the TikTok live Riley was broadcasting filled with comments flying so fast I couldn't read them all. Wait, that Nora? Her own family didn't know? Riley didn't lower the phone. If anything, she lifted it higher, angling it to catch my face, my father's, the banner with her name. I could almost see the thought forming behind her eyes. This would make the foundation explode online, make her look connected, important, part of the story. But she had no idea that for once, the story wasn't orbiting her. The room parted as I walked toward the stage, little pockets of silence opening around me. I could feel people staring, recalculating everything they thought they knew about the quiet girl in the cheap dress at the back table. Lucas handed me the microphone. His fingers brushed mine, steady, grounding. "Say whatever you want," he murmured. "It's your night." I turned to face the tables. My dad stood near the edge of the stage now, rigid smile glued on. Riley hovered below him, still holding her phone up, like she was sure this would all circle back to her. "My name is Nora Mitchell," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I felt, but it carried. "Most of you know me, if you know me at all, as Riley's older sister. The one with computers." A ripple of awkward laughter. Even my father's mouth twitched. "What my family didn't know," I went on, "is that I founded IronGate Labs. The company you just saw in your news alerts." Phones flashed again as people took pictures. Somewhere in the back, someone actually clapped once, then stopped, unsure. I set the microphone on the clear podium and reached into my small clutch. This morning, I said, pulling out the neatly folded agreement, my family asked me to sign some documents to put my grandmother's inheritance in order. They offered me $75,000 so I could have, in their words, a comfortable life. A few heads turned toward my father. He shifted his weight, eyes narrowing. I signed, I stated. Twice. In front of witnesses. And they did too. I unfolded my copy carefully, the paper making a soft crackle in the microphone as I lifted it. The ballroom lights reflected in the glass walls. I could see our distorted reflections, me, my father, Riley with her phone, Evan frozen by the donors. There's a clause in here, I said, that they didn't read. Dad took a step forward. Nora, that's enough, this isn't. Dad, I said quietly into the mic, without looking at him, you signed it. I found the paragraph Lucas and I had buried and read it out loud, word for word, my voice steady now. An irrevocable, unconditional, and perpetual renunciation of any direct or indirect claim, lien, encumbrance, security interest, or expectation, contractual or equitable, in or against any present or future asset, share, option, or income stream belonging to Nora Mitchell, including but not limited to equity or proceeds related to IronGate Labs Incorporated. The room went very still. In plain English, I said, lowering the page, my father and my sister have just waived any right to my company, my stock, or any money that comes from them. Now or ever. I looked straight at Riley. Her face had drained of color, but her hand was still up, still streaming. Lucas stepped forward then, taking the microphone gently from my hand. His voice was almost conversational. To clarify for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of reading this document 12 times, he said, and a faint nervous chuckle broke out, what Nora is describing is a fully binding mutual waiver. She gives up any claim to their assets or inheritance. In exchange, they give up any claim to hers. He glanced at my dad and Riley, then back at the crowd. As of this evening, he continued, IronGate Labs' market capitalization places Ms. Mitchell's stake, including reserved friends and family share packages that would have been available to her immediate relatives, at a value in excess of $500 million. $500 million. Spoken out loud into a microphone under a banner with my sister's name. The noise in the room changed, no longer a polite murmur, but something sharper, a mix of disbelief and fascination. Someone whistled under their breath. A woman near the front actually gasped. By choosing to characterize her as a burden, Lucas said, and by asking her to voluntarily help the family with certain debts in exchange for $75,000, her family members signed an agreement that legally blocks them and their creditors from ever touching her IronGate assets. I watched my father as the meaning finally sank in. The way his jaw clenched. The way his eyes flicked to the papers in my hand, then to the exit, then to Evan, as if any of them could roll this back a few minutes and snatch the pen out of his fingers. Riley's arm slowly lowered. Her phone was still recording. In the faint glow of the screen, I saw her see the comments turning, shifting from adoration to horror to morbid curiosity. My sister looked up at me like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. And I held her gaze. For $75,000, I said quietly into the mic, you sold your right to everything you thought you were entitled to. That was your choice. And your signatures. The band in the corner sat motionless. The waiters had stopped moving. Even the ice in the glasses seemed to have frozen. The internet finished what I started on that stage. By the next morning, the clip from Riley's TikTok live had been stitched, duet, captioned, slowed down, and reposted 1,000 different ways. People replayed the exact moment Lucas said $500 million, the zoom on my father's face, the way Riley's phone shook. But the part that really caught fire wasn't my reveal. It was a snippet from earlier in the evening, before the speeches, when I'd been standing with Riley near the bar and someone's phone had been recording in the background. I'd forgotten the moment entirely until I heard it in a stranger's video, my sister's voice, bright and impatient, saying, Nora, you should be grateful. We're cleaning up Grandma's mess for you. 8 words. You should be grateful. They burned. Someone synced that audio over the scene of her smiling on stage under the banner with her name. The comments wrote themselves. Within 24 hours, "You should be grateful" was a sarcastic hashtag under stories about financial abuse and toxic families. The Riley Foundation posted a stiff statement first, how proud they were of Dr. Mitchell, how complex family matters were being handled privately. But it didn't land well. Donors started tagging them under the viral clips, asking why their compassionate poster surgeon talked like that to her own sister. And 48 hours later, the board moved from proud to panicked. An email leaked faster than the official decision. The foundation was temporarily removing Dr. Riley Mitchell as the public face of the organization pending internal review. Within a week, her image vanished from the website's homepage. New banners went up without her. Event posters were quietly swapped out. She texted me a screenshot of the announcement. "Are you happy now? You humiliated me. You ruined my life." I stared at the messages and felt a dull ache, not triumph. Then I blocked her number. Dad's empire started crumbling the moment the first article framed the story not as a family conflict, but as a case study in risk. A business blog wrote a piece titled, "When Your Failing IT Kid Owns the Company You Need." They mentioned IronGate's IPO, my stake, the waiver clause, the fact that my father had attempted to push family debt onto the founder of the very company he should have been courting as a client. In real estate circles, his name turned radioactive overnight. Banks don't like messy headlines. They like predictable returns. So, by the end of the week, one of his smaller credit lines had been temporarily suspended pending review. A partner on a big coastal development postponed their meeting indefinitely. Another requested clarifying documentation on Seaglass-related collateral he suddenly couldn't provide. He called me first. 6 missed calls. Then a voicemail I did listen to once. "Nora, this is being blown out of proportion," he said, voice tight. "I'm your father. You embarrass me in front of my peers for what? A clause in a document? Call me back. We can fix this." No, we couldn't. I deleted the voicemail and had Lucas's office send a formal notice directing all communication through counsel. A few days later, Dad tried a different tactic, an email forwarded from some high-priced lawyer arguing that the waiver was clearly signed under emotional distress and might be voidable. Lucas replied with the timestamped copies, the security footage from the glass conference room, and the recording of my father telling a staffer afterward that it went perfectly. No duress. No confusion. Just greed, documented in high definition. After that, Dad's messages got shorter, angrier. "You're destroying your own family. Do you understand what you've done to me?" I did. But now, I decided that wasn't my emergency to fix. Evan's downfall was quieter at first, but more vicious once it began. When word got around that he'd been involved in a scheme to offload debt onto the founder of a cybersecurity firm just as it went public, his high-net-worth clients suddenly weren't returning his calls. A few of them reached out directly to IronGate, asking if we could confirm certain rumors. We didn't say much legal couldn't, but enough details were already in the public filings and leaked messages for people to connect the dots. One of his biggest accounts terminated their relationship with his firm, citing misalignment of ethics. A smaller investor went on a podcast and hinted heavily about a finance guy who thought he could outsmart his tech exec X and ended up blacklisted. He sent me a long email, part apology, part sales pitch. He wrote about how he'd always believed in me, how he had only been trying to protect everyone, how this whole thing had gotten out of hand. He suggested we sit down like adults and restructure the agreement so that everyone wins. I flagged it, forwarded it to Lucas, and added his number to my block list too. The attempts to contest the documents never made it far. Their lawyers circled the same arguments: lack of understanding, imbalance, undue influence. But every time, the facts sat there like bricks. They'd had the papers in advance. They'd insisted on the meeting location. There were witnesses in the building. I had my own counsel, who had been involved in drafting everything. The harsh reality, Lucas explained, was that a court wasn't going to rescue them from a deal they'd only decided they disliked after learning how valuable I was. If they push this, Lucas said on one call, their entire strategy, the motel, the debt, goes on record. They knew what they were doing. A judge isn't going to be sympathetic. So they didn't push. Not that way. They pushed in messages, through mutual acquaintances, through carefully worded posts about family loyalty and private struggles. Friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to hear my side and make sure I'd thought this through. A cousin messaged me a long paragraph about forgiveness. So I answered once clearly. I wish them no harm, I wrote. I'm just not available as collateral anymore. Then I changed my number, swapped my personal email, locked down every account that still had any trace of the old me attached. At the office, I asked our receptionist to filter any calls from Houston. They went straight to legal. In the space where my family's demands used to live, there was suddenly quiet. Not peace, not yet. The guilt didn't vanish just because the paperwork held. I still woke up some nights thinking about my dad's face on that stage, Riley's tremble when she lowered her phone, the way Evan had looked at me like I was suddenly a stranger. But I also woke up without a new emergency in my inbox that only I could fix. A few days after the ball, I drove back to the coast alone. No speeches this time. No dress code. Just me, a rental SUV, and a folder on the passenger seat with papers from a company that technically didn't exist 3 months ago. Harborline Holdings, LLC. That's what we'd called it when Lucas set it up, long before my dad's family meeting. A quiet little shell with one purpose, be standing in the right place when his lenders got nervous enough to entertain an offer. Buying out the debt on Seaglass felt strangely boring. Wires. Signatures. A conference call with a tired bank attorney who clearly just wanted the bad loan off his books. By the time the last email came through, the Seaglass Inn wasn't my father's collateral anymore. It was just mine. When I pulled into the old gravel lot, the sign was still there, Seaglass Inn, in flickering blue, one letter dimmer than the others. Dad's trucks and Riley's foundation van were parked along the back, where they'd turned a row of rooms into a temporary storage space for supplies and equipment that somehow never moved. I walked into the office with my shoulders back, keys in my hand, and a copy of the title transfer in my bag. Dad was there, arguing on the phone. Riley sat on the edge of the old check-in counter, scrolling with that vacant, angry focus she'd adopted lately. They both looked up when they saw me. "What are you doing here?" my father snapped. I set the papers on the counter, face up. "This is a formal notice," I said. Harborline Holdings has acquired the debt secured by Seaglass Inn. As of this morning, full title has been transferred to me. "You're trespassing on my property." Riley actually laughed. "You're bluffing." "Read it," I stated. They did. I watched the color drain from my father's face a second time in 1 week. I didn't gloat. I simply handed them both written eviction notices for every room, every warehouse, every inch they'd claimed as theirs. "You have 72 hours to clear out your things," I said. After that, luck's change. Riley opened her mouth. "Nora, you can't." "I can," I said. "And I am." I left before they could answer, stepping back into the salty air that had once held my grandmother's laughter. This place felt like it was breathing again. 2 weeks later, I moved into a small apartment in San Francisco, 10 minutes from IronGate's headquarters. Not fancy, by local standards, it was almost modest, but the windows looked out over the bay, and the light in the mornings reminded me of the coast. On my first day walking into the office as the publicly named CEO, my team lined the hallway and started clapping. Someone had taped a printed photo from the ball to the glass door, scribbling over it, "Our failed it girl." The quotation marks were the best part. I stood there for a second, swallowing hard, realizing that for the first time in my life, the people around me weren't looking at me as a burden or a backup plan. They were looking at me as the one who'd built something they believed in. I still think about Seaglass, about repainting the doors, redoing the rooms, maybe one day turning it into a place where people like me can come to breathe. No speeches, no guilt, no "you should be grateful" hanging in the air. Just a quiet inn on the coast, owned by the girl who finally stopped apologizing for existing. If you've ever been the quiet one, the loser, or the family tech support who turned out to be more than they saw, tell me your own story in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next crazy family stories. See you in the next video.